Welcome to Empathy Stories, where every story is a reminder of the power of kindness, understanding, and redemption. Today, we bring you a deeply moving tale about a successful businessman, Tom, who learns that true leadership is about acknowledging past wrongs, making amends, and finding a path to healing. Stay with us as we delve into this journey of second chances. Tom Carson stood outside the bustling doors of his own restaurant, the Crimson Fork, the crown jewel of his career. Despite the restaurant's glowing reviews, the packed tables, and the steady flow of satisfied customers, Tom couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was missing. For all the success, something deep inside him had started to feel hollow. The passion he had once poured into his business had faded. He had spent years climbing the ladder of success. But now, with the pinnacle reached, it felt as though he had lost touch with the very thing that had made him start this journey, his connection to the people. The Crimson Fork had always been more than just a restaurant to Tom. It had been a vision, a dream. He had poured everything into it: money, effort, late nights, and tireless ambition. But somewhere along the way, he had gotten caught up in the machine of it all. The luxury, the fame, the power. It was all beginning to feel like a distant echo. He wondered how much of his success had come at the cost of something deeper. He couldn't remember the last time he had just sat down, relaxed, and observed the restaurant like a customer. So, Tom decided to go undercover. But not as a waiter. Not as a cook, this time. He would be a regular customer. A simple hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face would shield his identity. He had no desire to be recognized. He simply wanted to sit in a booth, observe, and listen. He wanted to hear what the customers were really thinking, how they felt about the food, the service, the atmosphere. For once, he wasn't going to lead the charge. He was going to be a part of it, on the receiving end of his own product. Tom entered the restaurant on a rainy Tuesday evening. The staff, busy with the dinner rush, barely paid him any attention. He slid into a booth near the back, his eye scanning the room. The atmosphere was vibrant and alive, just as it should be. The familiar sounds of plates clinking, drinks being served, and soft laughter filled the air. The ambience was everything Tom had worked for. Yet, as he sat there, something about the scene made him feel like an outsider. A cheerful waitress approached his table, flashing him a warm smile, though her eyes betrayed a practiced effort. "Good evening, sir. Can I start you off with something to drink?" she asked. "Water's fine," Tom replied, his voice casual, deliberately avoiding drawing any attention to himself. "Give me a few minutes to look over the menu." The waitress nodded and moved on, and Tom opened the menu, which he knew by heart. But his focus wasn't on the food. Instead, he was watching the people around him. He was listening for those unfiltered, raw opinions that only a real customer could share. Just as he was beginning to relax into his role, he heard the soft voices of two boys coming from the booth directly behind him. Their conversation was quiet, but the urgency in their words drew his attention. He didn't mean to eavesdrop, but their discussion seemed to be about something important, something personal. "Do you think we'll even see him?" the first boy asked, his voice tinged with anxiety. "I don't know," replied the second boy. "But Mom said this is the place. She said he comes here all the time." Tom's curiosity piqued. Who were they talking about? And why were they so insistent? "What if we get caught?" the first boy continued. "We're not even supposed to be here." "We won't get caught," the second boy snapped. "We just need to figure out who he is." Tom's heart rate quickened as he realized they weren't just talking about any random person. They were searching for someone specific. Someone who, by the way they spoke, was tied to something much deeper than a casual encounter. The first boy whispered again. "Mom said he ruined her life." Tom's stomach dropped, and his grip tightened on the menu. Ruined her life? The words hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. The second boy continued, his voice sharp with bitterness. "He took everything from her. Do you think he'll even care?" Tom's mind was racing. The words cut through the din of the restaurant like a knife. Who were these boys talking about? And how could he possibly be involved? He didn't know the answers, but the growing unease gnawed at him. His first instinct was to dismiss it, kids being dramatic. Maybe just another local celebrity they were obsessed with. But something about the urgency in their voices didn't sit right. Something about the way they spoke of this man, this person who had wronged them, hit a nerve. As he waited for his meal, the conversation continued. It wasn't about food. It wasn't about anything trivial. It was personal. Deeply personal. The boy in the hoodie leaned closer to his companion. "Mom said he ruined everything. We just need to find him." Who's he talking about? Tom thought. Could it be him? Could he, Tom Carson, be the one they blamed? His mind was racing. But the more he listened, the more certain he became this wasn't a random search. They were looking for someone who had caused them pain. Someone who, from their perspective, had ruined their world. Tom's stomach churned. There was only one way to find out. But how could he confront them? Reveal his identity in the middle of their conversation? Could he walk up to them? Apologize for something he didn't even understand? Before he could decide, the waitress returned to take his order. The moment passed, and the boys' conversation grew quieter, as though they had sensed his presence. Tom, now more than ever, needed answers. Who were they talking about? And why were they blaming him? Tom's pulse raced as he tried to absorb the weight of the boys' conversation. They had been talking about him. He was certain of it now. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together. But the more he heard, the more questions emerged. How had he hurt them? What had he done to their mother? He couldn't understand how he, a man who prided himself on running a business with integrity, could have caused such deep harm. The boys, still unaware of Tom's presence, continued their hushed conversation. Their words, once muffled, began to pierce the air with clarity. "Do you think he even knows what he did to us?" the first boy asked, his voice soft but filled with bitterness. "He took everything. Everything." The second boy responded more sharply. "I don't think he cares. He's too busy with his fancy restaurant to care about people like us." Tom's heart sank. Their words were like a cold punch to the gut. The boy's resentment was palpable. And Tom couldn't help but wonder who this he was, the man they blamed for their pain. As the first boy muttered, "He ruined everything," a sickening realization washed over Tom. They were talking about him. They were blaming him for something that had gone wrong in their lives. Why? What had happened that could possibly make him responsible for their suffering? Unable to remain seated any longer, Tom rose from his booth, his mind still reeling from the accusations. He needed to know more, he needed answers. He had come here to observe, to gain insight into his restaurant's atmosphere. But now, it seemed as though fate had brought him face to face with something much more personal. Something that might change everything. Tom adjusted his hoodie, keeping his movements casual. and made his way toward the counter near the kitchen. From here, he could watch the boys without drawing attention to himself. His eyes were fixed on them, studying their every gesture, their every word. The boys were still deep in conversation, but the atmosphere had shifted. The anger in their voices was more evident now. "I just want to know why," the boy in the hoodie said, his voice filled with frustration. "Why did he do it? Why did he take everything from us?" The second boy responded more softly. "Maybe we've got the wrong guy. Maybe it's not him." "No," the first boy insisted. "It's him. Em showed me his picture. It's definitely him." Tom froze. They had seen his picture. His stomach turned over as the pieces of the past suddenly clicked into place. A photo. Angela Carter. That name. He remembered her. She had worked for him years ago. A bright young chef with a passion for food. She had been part of the team, part of the success of the restaurant. But then, one day, she had quit without any explanation, leaving him confused. And now, years later, her children were sitting here, blaming him for ruining their lives. Tom's breath caught in his throat. He needed to know more. He couldn't sit back and let this situation fester. Not when it involved his past mistakes. He had to get to the bottom of it. "Excuse me," Tom said, trying to keep his tone calm as he approached the booth. Both boys stiffened, their wide eyes meeting his. Their reactions made it clear that they knew who he was now. The boy in the hoodie stared at him with a mix of suspicion and anger, while the second boy's face drained of color as the realization hit him. "I couldn't help but overhear," Tom continued, keeping his voice steady. "You mentioned someone earlier, someone who might be here. Are you looking for someone?" The boy in the hoodie straightened his posture, his gaze hardening. "Why do you care?" he asked, his voice defensive. Tom took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. He couldn't reveal his identity just yet. He needed to tread carefully. "I thought maybe I could help if you're looking for someone," he said, choosing his words deliberately. The boys exchanged a glance, and Tom noticed the shift in their expressions, an almost imperceptible recognition. The boy in the hoodie narrowed his eyes and tilted his head slightly. "Wait a second," he said slowly. "You look familiar." Tom's heart skipped a beat. It was happening. They were figuring it out. "You're him, aren't you?" all the boy said, his voice sharp with accusation. Tom felt a chill run down his spine. "I'm Michael Luciano," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But how do you know who I am?" The first boy, his voice trembling with anger, responded. "Because of what you did to our mom." Tom's mind went blank. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The boy in the hoodie shot him an accusing glare, his voice venomous. "You ruined her life. You took everything from her." Tom's head was spinning. Who were they talking about? He had been a mentor to so many young chefs, including Angela Carter. But had he really hurt her? Had his ambition destroyed her life without him realizing it? His thoughts were swirling, and his stomach twisted as the boys continued their accusations. "You stole from her," the second boy said quietly. "You used her and took everything she worked for." Tom struggled to process the words. Angela. She had been such a bright and eager young woman, filled with potential. He had trusted her. But now, as the truth began to surface, he realized the extent of the damage his actions might have caused. How had he missed all this? Tom's mind flashed back to the days when Angela had worked for him. He had been focused, determined to make the restaurant a success. But had he been blind to the pain he might have caused those who helped him along the way? Could he have taken her ideas and claimed them as his own? Could he have blacklisted her from ever getting another job in the industry? The weight of the boy's accusations hung in the air, suffocating him. The guilt was unbearable, and he knew he had to face the truth. But where did he go from here? The rain had been falling steadily as Tom stood in front of the modest apartment complex, feeling the weight of everything he had learned from the boys. Their words echoed in his mind like a hammer striking steel. You ruined her life. You took everything from her. The accusation was clear, but the full depth of what he had done was only now beginning to surface. He stepped forward, his footsteps heavy, each one marked by a sense of both dread and resolve. The building looked worn, its edges frayed by time, a stark contrast to the life he had come from. Yet, it was here that Sarah, Angela Carter, he remembered now, had spent the years he hadn't seen her. All those years ago, he had taken her for granted, used her work without giving her the recognition she deserved. And now, it seemed, her life had spiraled out of control because of his ambition. As Tom reached the door, Jacob, one of the boys, opened it. His eyes, still filled with distrust, studied him for a moment before stepping aside to let him enter. The apartment was small, almost humble in comparison to Tom's lavish penthouse. But there was something warm about it. It felt lived in, full of the quiet hum of a family that had learned to find joy despite their circumstances. The walls were lined with photographs, and the faint smell of cooking lingered in the air. Yet, Tom couldn't escape the image of Angela, the woman whose life he had unknowingly destroyed, sitting there in front of him. As he walked into the living room, his gaze immediately fell on her. She looked different, older, but her sharp eyes and fierce presence were unmistakable. Her auburn hair, now touched with grey, framed a face that still carried the weight of all the years of hardship. She hadn't lost her strength, but Tom could see the remnants of her struggles in the tiredness of her eyes. Angela, he whispered, his voice full of regret. She looked up, and for a moment, Tom thought she might turn away in anger. But she didn't. Instead, she set down the remote, her expression hard but controlled. What do you want? Michael, she asked, her tone distant and cold. Tom's stomach churned as he tried to find the right words. I had no idea, he said quietly, his voice shaking. I had no idea what I had done to you. What you went through because of me. Angela's eyes narrowed. She didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the years of unresolved pain. Finally, she spoke, her voice bitter but quiet. You never cared, she said. You took credit for my work. You used me to build your dream. And when I tried to speak up, you blacklisted me. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Tom felt as though he had been struck. He searched his memory, trying to recall everything from those days. But it all seemed blurry. There had been so many decisions, so much pressure to succeed. Had he really done that to her? I didn't know it would turn out like this, Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. I was so focused on the success of the restaurant. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. His eyes searched hers, desperate for understanding. I was wrong. Angela. I can see that now. Angela leaned back, crossing her arms. But there was a subtle shift in her posture. You want to make it right? She asked, her voice low but steady. You want to fix everything you ruined? You think offering me a job is enough? Tom took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. No, he said firmly. It's not about buying your forgiveness. It's about giving you the recognition you should have had from the start. He swallowed hard. I want to offer you a senior position at Luciano's Bistro. A position with full creative control. I want the world to know the truth about your contributions. You deserve the credit you've always been denied. Angela blinked, clearly caught off guard by the offer. For a moment, she said nothing, her emotions flitting between disbelief, anger, and something that might have been hope. You think a job is going to undo all the damage you've done? She asked, her voice thick with emotion. Tom shook his head. No. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want to help you. Angela, you're a brilliant chef. And I want to help you get back to what you love. He felt a mix of guilt and urgency. You don't have to forgive me. But I want to give you the chance you should have had from the beginning. For a long moment, Angela just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, to his surprise, she exhaled deeply and slowly extended her hand toward him. Let's see if we can make this work, she said quietly. Tom reached out, shaking her hand, relief flooding through him. It was a small step, but it was something. A chance for redemption. As he left the apartment, he felt a strange sense of peace. He knew that making amends wouldn't be easy, that it would take time to rebuild trust, but this was a start. He had done the right thing. It wasn't just about offering her a job, it was about acknowledging the wrongs he had done and taking responsibility for them. In the days that followed, Tom reached out to his contacts in the culinary world. He made sure Angela's story was shared with food critics and industry leaders. And with that, the path toward redemption was set into motion. But the road ahead wasn't without its challenges. Trust, once broken, was not easily rebuilt. But as Angela returned to Luciano's Bistro as co-head chef, Tom felt the weight of the past begin to lift. They worked side by side, creating new dishes, blending their ideas. And slowly, the restaurant began to flourish again. But more than that, they were creating something more meaningful, an opportunity for Angela to reclaim her career and for Tom to rebuild what he had nearly destroyed. For the first time in years, he truly understood what it meant to be a leader. And as he watched Angela work, a deep sense of gratitude filled him. He couldn't undo the past, but in the quiet strength of her presence, he found the courage to face the future. Thank you for watching this heartfelt story on Empathy Stories. Tom's journey reminds us all that it's never too late to make things right. And that sometimes, redemption comes from the most unexpected places. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of hope, kindness, and personal growth.